So some more pictures and all my little memories.
Welcome back to Night Child Reviews. A number of Prince items have been sold recently at an auction. And in this video, I'm going to take a quick look at some of those items sold, a little bit of the backstory to each one, and at the end talk about 3 concerns I have about these auctions. So, without delay, let's dive straight in. The very first item is an original 1987 US first pressing of the Black Album. This is quite interesting because there is a backstory here. Basically, there's a letter of authenticity from Jeff Gold, who was the owner of Record Mecca and a former executive vice president and general manager of Warner Brothers, who worked closely with Prince during the 1990s. Now, Jeff's statement reads like this. He says, "This example is one of 5 sealed copies discovered in December 2017 in the collection of a former Warner Brothers records executive who worked on the Black Album. The executive's daughter had purchased her first turntable and had asked her parents to send her some albums. Their record collection had been boxed up in a closet for more than 25 years, and while searching for records that might interest their daughter, they stumbled upon 2 never-opened Warner Brothers record mailers. Expecting to find some promo albums inside, they opened these for the first time and discovered 5 perfect, sealed copies of the Black Album. These had been sent to the executive in 1987 in December when the albums were ordered to be destroyed, and for 30 years the 2 mailers had sat unopened among their other boxed up vinyl. After opening one copy and confirming it was a genuine 1987 first pressing, they contacted me, a friend, a former Warner Brothers colleague. The family decided to keep the open copy but sell the remaining copy through Record Mecca. After Rolling Stone magazine wrote an article about the discovery, the story went viral, and the 3 sealed copies for sale were sold within 24 hours. The copy here is the final sealed copy in perfect condition." Next up is a really interesting notebook, which is basically Prince's initial ideas for Under the Cherry Moon. It has a handwritten and signed title page, and it has lots of notes about Under the Cherry Moon. It's interesting because a lot of these ideas actually never made it into the final script. Indeed, lots of the notes are based around the character of Katie and Jill. Now, obviously, Katie ends up with a small part in Under the Cherry Moon, but Jill is nowhere to be found. It's also interesting because at this point, Christopher Tracy is introduced as a painter, and he talks about painting women and can I paint you. So it's obviously a very rough first draft of the ideas that Prince would later marshal into Under the Cherry Moon. So this is, quite an interesting piece, and obviously to see Prince's creative process and sort of some of his dialogue, that's certainly a very intimate and interesting piece. The next item is actually possibly one of the most intimate items. It's a very strange item. It's a cassette tape, which is basically an answer machine messages, and it contains 2 voice messages from Prince. The tape has actually been transferred to a digital audio disc for the sale, and you obviously get the tape as well. The message includes Prince saying, "Karen, can you have Ashley bring by food? When it's ready, can she just leave it in the kitchen? Thanks." And there's also a second message where Prince talks about, "I've lost Vanity's number. Please call me at Paisley." There's also messages from Prince's housekeeper, his chef, John at Paisley Park, publicist Robin Riggs, Alan Leeds, Madonna's assistant Melissa Crow, and others. This was taken apparently from the collection of Prince's former assistant, accompanied by a letter of provenance. The next item is Prince's personally owned and worn custom Italian 2-piece suit, consisting of a soft white linen jacket with padded shoulders and 6 decorative mother-of-pearl buttons and a matching pair of white linen slacks with side zipper. Apparently this item was accompanied by a letter of provenance from the brother of the original recipient. The statement reads, "My brother worked for the entertainer Prince commencing in 1990 and eventually became the general manager for all 3 of Prince's Glam Slam nightclubs in Minneapolis, Los Angeles and Miami. Prince performed at Glam Slam North many times over the years, entertaining fans with a variety of material normally prior to an upcoming tour. Prince eventually sold Glam Slam to his manager Gilbert Davison, who was also the president of Paisley Park. My brother continued to work for Gilbert at Quest handling operations as he had done for Prince. This 2-piece white suit with 6 opalescent buttons and Made in Italy label was worn by Prince and given to my brother." The next item is actually not technically a Prince item, it's a Sheila E item. I suppose you could argue there's not always a huge difference, but this is a drumhead from the Sign of the Times movie, signed by Sheila E. So that could be quite a cool item, I suppose, to own. The next item is one of a series of albums which Prince has signed. This particular one is inscribed "To Wanda, Love Prince," and it's been apparently verified this is Prince's signature. Obviously it's his first album, so that carries a certain amount of cachet with that. This next item is actually one of the most interesting, I think. This is interesting in that it seems to come from two different eras. There's a letter of authenticity from the owner, which was Maite Garcia, Prince's former wife, that states that this gold stage outfit was worn by Prince for the Jam of the Year World Tour. And the gold top has large musical treble clefs incorporated into fabric, which are highlighted in the long sleeves. However, there's also a picture of it with the trousers being worn at the 1995 We Are the World event, when Prince famously refused to sing with Quincy Jones. So it seems to have possibly come from two different eras. I haven't seen it on the Jam of the Year World Tour, but I obviously assume Maite would be more aware of that than myself. But it's really interesting piece. Obviously it's tailor-made for Prince, and this is something that I would imagine would be one of the bigger selling items of this auction. The next item is Prince's personally worn long white cashmere trench coat by Ashton Michael from a photo shoot for the June 2014 issue of Essence magazine. This is quite interesting because you rarely get clothes from this late in Prince's career, and it's a claim that the RR auction make that this is something you rarely get to see. It is certified that it's authentic Ashton Michael, worn by the artist. It's sold as is with, quote, natural wear from the artist, and includes the copy of the magazine. It's quite interesting because lots of these clothes Prince seem to wear, but then they seem to end up obviously in different hands. So, but this is certainly a very interesting piece from much later in Prince's career. According to the auctioneer's house, this is a pair of shoes that Prince wore during the Mel B interview, the famous Mel B interview at Paisley Park. They're custom-made tan high-heeled boots crafted by famous Sunset Boulevard cobbler shop Andre No. 1, who made about 3,000 pairs of shoes and boots for Prince over the course of 2 decades. What's quite interesting is the boots measure an overall 6.5 inches tall, inclusive of the 4-inch wooden heels. And I think what I find really fascinating is you can see the support on them. They have a stainless steel bar, which apparently is to ensure that it wouldn't snap off when Prince was obviously performing and coming back up from a split, and he really needed that extra kind of strength in his shoes. So it's interesting to see the strength they had to put in there, and the kind of pounding I think that Prince gave his shoes whilst giving his energetic performances. Now, these boots are some boots. I mean, look at these. These are amazing. This is so Prince. These are personally owned and worn custom boots with new power generation on them. Crafted in 2002 by Andre No. 1, the famous Sunset Boulevard cobbler, which is really interesting because there's also notes with it from Prince's assistant talking about the boots, what he would like, how he would like them designed. There's actually an interesting comment on one of the bits of correspondence where the assistant says to Andre, "I'm very sorry about the late payment of your invoices," and they'll bring it up with accounting on Friday. So you can see the inner workings there of Paisley Park. It's interesting to see this design from the idea from Prince, the kind of way he wanted these things to be made, and the amount of effort and time that people had to put into them. So yeah, it's really quite interesting. Without any doubt whatsoever, this would be, I think, unquestionably the star of the auction. Prince's personally owned cloud electric guitar, custom made by Minneapolis designer Kurt Nelson in the 1990s. I mean, it doesn't get more iconic really than this. It comes with a guitar pick, the original purple hardshell carrying case with a sort of really plush interior. And Nelson writes, "I built this yellow cloud guitar after being contacted by Prince and Paisley Park. They were looking for someone to build a cloud guitar and found me. Paisley Park lent me the original cloud guitar to make patterns and take measurements from. I chose to make my copy as a neck-through construction as opposed to a glue-in neck body joint. The electronics were chosen by them, and I hand-built 2 copies, both delivered in the early 1990s to Prince at Paisley Park. But it's quite interesting that you can see the little indents on part of the neck where it's sort of been damaged, and it's amazing to see this close up and how beautiful this item really truly is. It's also interesting that the colour was chosen by Paisley Park, and I was given one of Prince's yellow handkerchiefs, Kurt Nelson states, to colour match the Cloud 2. So that's quite interesting. I really think that that's a kind of funny story to add to it, and it's actually, the handkerchief is actually included as part of the auction. But yeah, this is undoubtedly, I imagine, the star of this auction. Again, another interesting item, which is basically kind of got a bit of a story to it. This is the Jam of the Year World Tour snakeskin shirt, owned by Prince and worn by Prince. Basically, it's being sold by Jeff Lowe. Now, Jeff Lowe writes that in 2007, he purchased a very large collection of items that belonged to the musician Prince from his ex-wife, Maite Garcia. The collection included many pairs of sunglasses, casual wear, stage clothing, footwear, and assorted personal items that Prince had left at his desk. According to Maite, she was awarded the couple's villa in Spain, and Prince had left all these items in the home. Prince then sued Jeff Lowe, apparently, in federal court to keep me, Jeff Lowe, from selling my collection to the Hard Rock restaurant chain. I challenged Prince's claim of trademark infringement in federal court and negotiated a deal with Prince to not sell the Hard Rock my collection. Now that Prince has passed away, I'm going to sell some of my remaining collection. So it's interesting, this has sort of come through a bit of a protracted legal process, and has quite an interesting backstory to it. Next up, we have a signed Controversy album, which is just simply signed Prince and an X. It's in apparently fine condition, although the record is not included. So there you go. You can have this and see how much it will cost you. Apparently the minimum bid started at $200, but it soon went up to quite a price, as you can see. I'm actually genuinely surprised at how much some of these items go for. Here is a Thanksgiving card from Prince, which Prince writes, "Love God, Prince." And it's interesting how just a card signed by Prince is already heading in to quite a few £1,000s. Next up is arguably one of the stranger items, is simply Prince's signature from a cheque. Apparently someone had his signature on a cheque and decided that now was the time to sell it. So I suppose that's something that people collect, and it's interesting to see how much that went for too. I have to say, from my own perspective, this is probably one of the more interesting items in that it's some working handwritten lyrics written by Prince for the song Face to Face, which apparently wasn't recorded. It's interesting to see how he's worked out these ideas, but apparently it turns out he didn't record this song. However, the opening line, "I've never been one to hide my feelings, baby you blow my mind," was used obviously in the song Space from the Come album. So that's interesting to see how that came about, and how Prince obviously refashioned that lyric to something else. This comes from the collection from Therese Stulil. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, and I apologise. She was hired by PRN Productions as production coordinator in 1986 and spent the next decade working for Prince. When he moved into Paisley Park in 87, her first project was cataloguing all recordings before filing them in the vault. On most mornings, she came to work to find a cassette on her desk, telling her to type up the lyrics of a song he'd recorded the night before. In 1989, she became Prince's personal assistant and handled all elements of his personal and professional life until 1996, which means she had the privilege of listening to nearly everything Prince recorded from 86 to 96. So I think that's a fascinating story. And she says of Prince, he was an extremely smart, articulate man with a very, very quick wit. He was driven by his creativity. There was always the next record, the next video, the next tour. It was 24/7. I will treasure those memories as well as the lifelong friendships I have to this day because of Prince and working at Paisley Park. The next item is simply a contact sheet of Prince photographs, original photographs, capturing him at a microphone in a series of poses, and he takes off his shirt. They look to be very much the 1986 parade tour era, and it has the photographer's credit on it. Again, next up is a really intimate item, I suppose, in a sense that it's a guitar pick, custom made. as a souvenir for guests at Prince's wedding to Maite Garcia on Valentine's Day 1996, which features Maite's M superimposed over the Prince symbol. They were given apparently as exclusives to guests in attendance. So this is quite interesting, and obviously would be, a very rare item. This next item probably has one of the best stories to it. It's a Prince-designed outfit ensemble worn by Monica Leitner on the cover of the Madhouse album 16 and in the music video for 10. So we have this sort of yellow dress with tiny black polka dots and 2 bright red gloves. It's made at Paisley Park, and it was quite interesting because there's a letter provided by Monica Leitner, also known as Sam, and she writes, "I've now had this dress for almost 30 years and I know I will never wear it again. Prince came up with the idea of a jazz album and asked me to do the cover. I had no idea that we'd end up doing 3 albums. This particular dress I wore for Madhouse 16. Prince had a stylist go out and shop for several dresses, but none worked. The wardrobe person on set put together a couple of options, but he didn't like any of those either. So Prince explained the exact look he wanted, which was the 40s, 50s pin-up style. Of course, it had to have polka dots because when we met, I was wearing a 40s style black and white polka dot dress, and he loved that look. The designer sketched up this description, he approved it, and this amazing dress was created." It's interesting that she states that Prince was famous for giving the women he worked with nicknames, and he told me, "I look like my name should be Samantha." And from that day on, he and everyone in his camp called me Sam. I've signed lots of autographs over the years as Monica, aka Sam. The next item is a jacket worn in a photo shoot, which is quite interesting because this is Prince's personally owned handmade Couture jacket worn in a photo shoot, crafted from cream coloured fabric with 3 pairs of ornate black corded rope clasps on the front. Now this is taken from the personal collection of Susanna Melvoin. Prince posed in this jacket in a shoot with photographer and filmmaker Randy St. Nicholas. Susanna Melvoin points out in her statement, "My sister wore this jacket many times, which is how I ended up with it. Long story, Prince wanted Wendy to wear it for a show at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel in Los Angeles in July 2007. He had 2 shows a night, one in the big entryway of the hotel and the other in a small club room. So Prince had Wendy wear it for those. Then a week later, on July 7th, Prince played 3 shows in Minneapolis in one day at Macy's, the Target Center and First Avenue, and Wendy performed there with him as well. After the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel performances, Prince loved Wendy in this jacket so much he had her wear it again for the shows in Minneapolis. After the last show, we were all together and went to give the jacket back. Prince said it looks clean on Wendy and that she should have more made in lots of colours. I've had the jacket ever since." Now, in terms of a wide appeal, this surely has to be up there. This is the Prince ruffled shirt from Purple Rain. It's quite interesting. Basically, what had happened is it appears to be accompanied by a letter of provenance from Juanita Escovedo, who is the mother of Prince protege Sheila Escovedo, stating that the shirt was made for Prince during the making of Purple Rain. It was then given by Prince to Sheila E., who then later sold it as part of a fundraising effort. So presumably this is being sold by the person who bought it as part of that fundraising effort, it would seem. Now, obviously, this is incredibly iconic. You see it throughout the Purple Rain movie. It's going to be really interesting to see how much this sells for, and I can show you that figure on the screen now. The next item is a pair of Prince's stage-worn Versace sunglasses from his 97-98 Gem of the Year tour, and he was also photographed wearing them at the New York Knicks Chicago Bulls game in 1996. He also wore them in 1997 with his interview with Chris Rock. These apparently come from Prince's ex-wife Maite Garcia. Prince was obviously a huge fan of Versace, and you can see that these sunglasses will be something that would command quite a high price. The next item is Prince's personally owned and worn custom-made symbol cufflink. There's a little bit of mystery about how this got to the market. The letter of provenance is from a long-time Prince collector, which states this gold custom cufflink was personally owned and worn by Prince. The cufflink came from a stage-worn shirt belonging to Prince, and it was purchased from an associate of Prince who worked with him. It's an incredible, rare piece. It'll be really interesting to see how much this raises. Anything to do with Purple Rain obviously is going to command a very substantial price. This is a pair of cufflinks made for and worn by Prince in the Purple Rain parade days. They feature 1-inch diameter blue jewels set into silver tone cups with original posts and toggles. This sort of slight tarnishing to the metal apparently. This is quite interesting because this is quite an intimate item again. It appears to have come from the costume designer Helen Hyatt, who worked from Prince for a few years between 1985 to 1991, sort of managed the wardrobe for music videos, photo shoots and dress prints for all of his tours during that period. So that seemed to have come from her private collection. This is a really strange story. Basically, this is a chain link belt from a Prince concert, which the statement is basically from a fan who said in her statement of provenance, "I'd recently broken up with a boyfriend and my colleagues at work bought me a concert ticket to help cheer me up. At first our seats being bought close to the concert date were actually behind the stage. Then an usher moved us round the end of the stage so we could actually see Prince perform. At the time, Prince would wear several of these chain link belts around his waist, and at some point during his concert he would take them off and toss them to the audience. I was lucky enough to have it tossed into my lap, and it's been boxed up until now." So it's literally just a fan who happened to catch this chain at one of the Prince's Purple Rain concerts. There was, of course, a time when Prince used to send Christmas cards, and here is a Christmas card with "Love God" printed on it and Prince's signature, apparently 10 inches by 7 inches. So that's quite interesting. They used to hand these out, presumably to people at Paisley Park or friends or suppliers. I really don't know. Next up is just a series of photographs, 4 original silver gelatin photographs of Prince. The description states it as the 1984 Purple Rain tour and a 1981 performance, but and I could be wrong, but looking at one of those pictures at least, it looks to be from a different era, but I stand to be corrected. But it'd be interesting to see what these 4 pictures fetch. So I have to ask you, how much would you pay for a Paisley Park keyring with the P logo etched on the front, given to a Paisley Park production assistant? Apparently this comes from somebody called Andrew Eastfold, nicknamed Mountain Man by Prince. Andrew worked for Prince from 2004 to 2010 and did odd jobs at Paisley Park. He also supervised the move for Prince, transferring his personal items from the Galpin Boulevard home to the Los Angeles home rented from NBA star Carlos Boozer. And finally, we come to 2 items which it's not clear whether these 2 items actually sold. There's a couple of slides of Prince with Maite. These were taken at the NAACP award show in 1997. The final item is basically a Maite signed picture and a few little bits and pieces, magazines about Prince. So that's it. And obviously together, that accounts for quite a substantial amount of money. Now, very briefly, I'll just move on to the 3 concerns I have here. The first concern about these auctions is essentially that it would be nice to think the money could go to a better cause. I know rich people are going to do what rich people do, and I mean rich people in the sense of the people buying these items, because you'd have to be relatively well off to be able to spend this kind of money. And it's a shame because Prince obviously believed so much in charity and good causes, and it would be a shame that perhaps this money could have been used better. Secondly, it's concerning to me that how many Prince items end up in other people's hands. Now, this is not to say anybody has obtained these items unduly or anything like that, but it's just interesting how many items Prince had, whether it be guitars, whether it be clothes, whether it be personal effects, that just ended up in other people's hands. And like I say, this is not in any way criticising the people who own them, but it's just very interesting to note. And thirdly, and I think above all, my concern is that will these items now just be locked away? I mean, you can't go and see them, you can't visit them. I understand part of me wants all the Prince items and merchandise at Paisley Park, but then I always worry, if something happens to Paisley Park, what if we lost it all? So I understand that in a sense these items will be passed down now from generation to generation possibly, but are they going to be kept behind closed doors? Are we never going to see them again? Is it going to be spread out throughout the world and just locked away in kind of rich people's private collections? And that's a shame when people won't be able to cherish these items, particularly when you look at the cloud guitar and you look at the clothes. It would just be nice, and perhaps it's just me being idealistic, but it would be nice to perhaps have a central collection or a number of central collections where everything was held. But what's more important, and what is always more important, is what's your opinion? How do you feel about this? Because I feel there's a part of me, and I know there's an American saying, of it makes me feel some kind of way, and it does make me feel a little uneasy. Something doesn't feel quite right, and maybe it's just me, but please let me know how you feel.